Scan the comments on any modern news article, and you'll find a pattern. If a person or policy aligns with the right, the most frequent label they receive is Hitler. He has become the go-to metric for judging conservative ideology. Historically, right-wing conservatism is defined by a specific set of principles: free markets, individual liberty, and a strict limit on how much the government can intervene in private life. But the Third Reich operated under a different logic. Within months of taking power, the regime abolished private property rights. The state dictated production quotas, seized control of the banks, and Hitler himself wrote extensively about his disdain for the Jewish nature of capitalism. The S in Hitler's NSDAP stood for Socialist, the same ideology governing the USSR. Despite this, we are taught to see these two regimes as polar opposites on the political spectrum. Mislabeling the political machinery of the past leaves us unable to identify it in the present. If we want to understand how totalitarianism takes root, we have to look past the modern labels and examine the architecture of the state itself. Post-World War I Weimar Germany was a landscape of economic ruin. Hyperinflation and mass unemployment created the specific environment where the fringe German Workers' Party could thrive. Taking leadership, Hitler realized he needed to peel workers away from the communists. He rebranded as the National Socialist German Workers' Party to signal its anti-capitalist intent. The movement's core was the 25-point program, its ideological blueprint. Points 9 through 21 demanded the nationalization of businesses and mandatory profit sharing. It also called for the abolition of unearned income, striking against finance capitalism to replace individual wealth with state welfare. The raw data in the NSDAP's own founding documents describes a left-wing economic engine. These policies reject free market conservatism, requiring total submission of private industry to government planners. If National Socialism shared these roots with the left, it raises a question. Why did Hitler's forces fight so violently against the communists in Germany? Both movements shared a common objective. They sought to force the individual to submit to the collective state. Their conflict was over which specific group would be the master of that state. International socialists, led by Stalin, divided the world by class. They focused their efforts on a revolution of the global proletariat against the bourgeoisie. National socialists implemented socialism on a racial level. They replaced class struggle with racial struggle, limiting the state's benefits to those they deemed ethnically pure. In Hitler's worldview, both free market capitalism and Marxist communism were two sides of the same Jewish conspiracy. His anti-Semitism drove his anti-capitalist policies. The violent street battles of the 1920s functioned as a turf war. Two rival socialist factions fought for the same anti-capitalist base, struggling over which collectivism would prevail. This was a socialist civil war. Both sides were committed to state control of the individual, only disagreeing on who would hold the power. In the 1930s, the Great Depression led many in the West to believe that free market capitalism was a failed experiment. Intellectuals began looking toward authoritarian states for a more efficient model. Before the full reality of the Holocaust was known, Western progressives often viewed the economic efficiency of Hitler and Mussolini with open admiration. American progressives in the 1930s saw a kinship in European state planning. Proponents of the New Deal studied the Axis powers' ability to mobilize labor and regulate industry as a model for American economic recovery. Western media frequently analyzed Mussolini's corporatism and Hitler's state-managed industry as valid alternatives to the chaos of unrestricted markets. They were seen as progressive, modern solutions for a world in crisis. During this era, the intellectual left recognized fascism and National Socialism as their ideological cousins in the broader war against free market individualism. The liberation of the death camps at the end of the war revealed the true nature of these regimes. This presented a survival crisis for Western collectivist movements that had previously praised them. Academics faced a problem. Their own theories of state-managed economies shared a historical lineage with the defendants at Nuremberg. To create distance, they utilized a classification system pioneered by Joseph Stalin. Stalin had long labeled any political rival, including independent socialists and the American government, as right-wing fascists to signal they were enemies of Moscow. This Soviet-era labeling eventually migrated into Western textbooks and media. By emphasizing the regime's nationalism while ignoring its economic controls, intellectuals reclassified the National Socialists as the extreme end of the right. This semantic shift successfully stripped the NSDAP's anti-capitalism and collectivist history from the mainstream record. It allowed Western progressives to maintain their own state planning goals while framing their ideological ancestors as their polar opposites. Totalitarianism does not care if it calls itself a worker's paradise or a racial destiny. The danger to humanity is always the same: the power of the state consuming the freedom of